Prologue: The Dark Water. There is a lake in the Scottish Highlands that holds more water than all the lakes and rivers of England and Wales combined. It is long and narrow and searingly cold, stretching 23 miles through ancient mountains. Its water is stained almost black by peat from the moorlands above, and even on the brightest summer days, darkness swallows everything below the first few feet of its surface. Its name is Loch Ness, and for nearly a century, the world has believed that something vast and unknown lives within it. Let the weight of the water settle over you now. Let the cold, peaty darkness drift in around the edges of the room. Tonight, we follow the long trail of people who stood at the shore of this ancient loch and saw something they could never fully explain. Chapter 1. The First Witness. Saint Columba, 565 A.D. The oldest written record of a creature in the waters near Loch Ness is over 1,400 years old. It comes from the life of Saint Columba, written by the monk Adomnan around 690 A.D., a biography of the Irish missionary who helped bring Christianity to the Picts of Scotland. According to Adomnan, Columba and his companions were traveling near the River Ness in the year 565 A.D., when they came upon a group of men burying a local farmer. The man had been swimming the river, they said, when a water beast rose from the depths and killed him. Columba ordered one of his monks, a man named Loch Ness, to swim across and retrieve a boat on the far bank. Loch Ness obeyed and slipped into the current. The creature returned. It surged up from below, mouth wide open, roaring across the water. And Columba raised his hand, made the sign of the cross, and commanded it to stop. The beast froze in the water, then turned and fled. Loch Ness reached the bank unharmed. Historians debate whether this story refers to the loch itself or only the river. It may be allegory. But for those who believe, this is where the story begins. In the 6th century, in dark Scottish water, with a saint and a monster facing each other across the current. Chapter 2. The Modern Legend is Born, 1933. Nearly 14 centuries passed before the Loch Ness Monster entered the modern world. The year was 1933, and the catalyst was a newly built road along the northern shore of the loch that gave ordinary people their first clear view of the water from a moving vehicle. On May 2, 1933, the Inverness Courier published a letter from a local couple, John and Aldi Mackay. They had been driving along the new road when they saw what they described as an enormous animal rolling and plunging on the surface of the loch. The water churned. The creature disappeared. The word monster appeared in print for the first time in connection with Loch Ness. 2 months later, in July 1933, a London businessman named George Spicer and his wife were driving near the loch when something crossed the road directly in front of their car. Spicer later described it as the nearest thing to a dragon or prehistoric animal I have ever seen in my life. It had a long, undulating neck. Its body was large and dark. It lurched across the road and slipped into the undergrowth toward the water. The whole encounter lasted only seconds, but it shook Spicer deeply enough that he reported it to the newspaper and described it in detail for the rest of his life. By the end of 1933, the story had been picked up by newspapers across Britain, Europe, and America. Expeditions were being planned. Rewards were offered. The Loch Ness Monster had arrived. Chapter 3. The Surgeon's Photograph, 1934. On a morning in April 1934, a London physician named Robert Kenneth Wilson was driving along the northern shore of Loch Ness when he pulled over and pointed his camera at the water. He later said he had spotted something unusual moving near the surface. The photograph he produced showed a long, slender neck rising from the dark surface of the loch, with a small head tilted slightly forward. It was grainy and taken from a distance, but it was unmistakable. Or seemed to be. The image was published in the Daily Mail and reprinted in newspapers around the world. For decades, it was the most famous evidence for the existence of the Loch Ness Monster. It became known as the surgeon's photograph, and it shaped the public image of Nessie for a generation. Then, in 1994, a man named Christian Sperling made a deathbed confession. The photograph, he said, was a hoax. He had constructed the creature himself by attaching a sculpted head and neck to the top of a small toy submarine. The scheme had been masterminded by big game hunter Marmaduke Wetherall, who wanted revenge on the Daily Mail after they had publicly humiliated him over fake monster footprints. Wilson had been recruited as the public face because a doctor's name lent credibility. The surgeon's photograph was a lie, and yet the legend it helped create was stronger than any single image. It survived the confession intact.
Chapter 4. A Record of Sightings. The Mid-Century Years. With or without the famous photograph, the sightings kept coming. Through the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s, dozens of people reported encounters with something large and unexplained in the loch. In 1934, a motorcyclist named Arthur Grant was riding along the northeastern shore of the loch at around 1 in the morning, when his headlights caught something enormous crossing the road. He swerved to avoid it and stopped his motorcycle. He later described 2 flippers at the front, a long neck, a small head, and a massive body that disappeared into the water. Grant was a veterinary student. He knew animal anatomy. He made a careful sketch of what he had seen and submitted it to a naturalist. The sketch has been preserved. In 1938, a South African tourist named John McIntosh Bell spent several weeks near the loch hoping to catch a glimpse of the creature. He did. He described seeing a large, gray-brown animal surface in calm water and remain visible for several minutes, moving slowly and steadily, before submerging with barely a ripple. During the Second World War, with fewer observers and less press attention, the sightings quieted, but did not stop. In 1943, an RAF crew flying low over the loch reported seeing a large, dark shape moving just beneath the surface, generating a visible wake. They estimated it at 30 feet or more in length. In 1952, naturalist Constance White began systematically collecting and analyzing witness accounts. She found striking consistency across unconnected observers. Large humps breaking the surface, a long neck, small head, dark skin. In 1957, she published her findings in a book called More Than a Legend, the first serious scientific treatment of the Loch Ness phenomenon, and a book that changed how researchers thought about the mystery.
Chapter 5. The Dinsdale Film, 1960. In April 1960, an aeronautical engineer named Tim Dinsdale arrived at Loch Ness with a 16mm movie camera. He had been reading about the monster for years and had decided to come and look for himself. On the morning of April 23rd, he was scanning the surface of the loch from a hillside above Foyers when he saw a large, reddish-brown hump moving steadily across the water. He grabbed his camera and filmed. The footage is short, less than a minute, and not particularly dramatic to modern eyes. But it shows something moving across the loch at speed, leaving a distinct double wake. It does not behave like a boat. It does not behave like a wave. It submerges gradually and disappears. In 1966, the Joint Air Reconnaissance Intelligence Centre, a division of British military intelligence that analysed aerial surveillance footage, examined the Dinsdale film. Their conclusion was careful but striking. The object, they said, was probably animate. It was not a surface vessel. The visible portion was estimated at roughly 5 feet wide and 2 feet above the waterline, with a much larger mass likely below. Dinsdale returned to Loch Ness more than 50 times over the following decades. He never filmed the creature again, but he never changed his account of what he had seen that April morning. He died in 1987, still certain. Chapter 6: Sonar, Science, and Operation Deep Scan. By the late 1960s, scientific expeditions had begun arriving at Loch Ness equipped with increasingly sophisticated tools. In 1968, a team from the University of Birmingham deployed sonar equipment in the loch and detected a large object moving at speed at depth, approximately 300 feet below the surface, traveling too fast to be any known species of fish in the loch. In 1972, Dr. Robert Rines of the Academy of Applied Science in Boston led a joint expedition using synchronized sonar and underwater cameras. The sonar detected a large moving object. The cameras, positioned in the water overnight, captured a blurry image of what appeared to be a large, diamond-shaped flipper, estimated at between 4 and 8 feet in length. The photographs were published in the journal Nature. Scientists at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California enhanced and analyzed the images. They could not definitively identify what had been captured. In 1987, Operation Deep Scan was launched, the most comprehensive sonar sweep of Loch Ness ever conducted. 24 vessels equipped with echo-sounding technology sailed in-line abreast across the full length of the loch, sweeping from surface to floor. They detected 3 large contacts at depth, objects larger than any known fish, moving in ways inconsistent with debris or geological features. The scientists were careful not to overclaim. They had not found the monster, but they had found something they could not explain. Chapter 7: Witnesses Worth Remembering. Among the hundreds of recorded sightings, some stand out because of who the witnesses were. In 1971, Father Gregory Brucey, a Benedictine monk at Fort Augustus Abbey at the southern end of the loch, was walking with a friend near the water when they both saw a large creature surface approximately 300 yards offshore. Father Brucey described a long neck rising from the water, a small head, and a body he estimated at 30 feet in length. The sighting lasted roughly 20 seconds. Father Brucey was considered by everyone who knew him to be a man of complete reliability and sober judgment. He never sought attention for the account and spoke of it only when asked directly. In 1979, a truck driver named Andy Walker was driving along the Eastern Shore Road in the pre-dawn darkness when his headlights picked up something crossing the road ahead of him. He described a large creature with a long neck moving on 4 short, thick legs that crossed the road and entered the water. Walker pulled over and sat in his cab for several minutes before he could continue driving. In 1996, retired police officer William Fraser was fishing from a boat near the village of Dawes when he watched a large object surface, move against the current for several minutes, and submerge. Fraser had spent decades as a professional observer of human behavior and physical evidence. He said simply that he could not identify what he had seen, but that it was clearly alive and clearly large. Chapter 8: The DNA Study, 2019. In 2019, Professor Neil Gemmell of the University of Otago in New Zealand published the results of the most scientifically rigorous investigation of Loch Ness ever conducted. His team had spent the previous year collecting water samples from across the loch, from the surface, from mid-depths, and from the floor, and analyzing the environmental DNA suspended within them. Every living creature sheds genetic material into the water around it. Skin cells, mucus, waste. Those fragments accumulate and drift. By sequencing the DNA in the water, the team could build a picture of everything that lived in the loch. They found hundreds of species: salmon, trout, pike, bacteria, plants. They found DNA from deer and other land animals that had presumably entered the water. They found no trace of any large reptile. No genetic signature consistent with a plesiosaur or any unknown species of large vertebrate. But there was one unexpected finding. The quantity of eel DNA in the loch was remarkably high, higher than the team had anticipated. Common eels, Anguilla anguilla, are present throughout Loch Ness. Under the right conditions, in cold, deep, food-rich water, eels can grow to substantial size. Professor Gemmell did not suggest that giant eels were responsible for the legend. He simply noted that the possibility could not be ruled out. Epilogue. What remains? It is late. The questions have all been asked, and most of them remain unanswered. We know that Loch Ness is vast, dark, and cold enough to preserve secrets for a very long time. We know that for nearly 90 years, sober and credible people, monks and engineers, police officers and scientists, have stood at its shores and seen something they could not name. We know that our best technology has found contacts at depth that do not match any known species. And we know that the DNA of the loch holds no trace of a prehistoric survivor. What lives in Loch Ness, if anything extraordinary lives there at all, remains unknown. And perhaps that is the most honest place to leave it. The surface of the water is still now. The peat-dark depths are quiet. Whatever moves in the cold below is far from the light, far from the questions, far from us.
That's all for today. The voice may fade, but the fire will keep burning. So just close your eyes. Good night.